Good evening, everyone. My name is Brittany Washington, and this is my 5-minute video on the ideological analysis. And I chose to use, the media that I chose to use, is actually the news, and specifically Fox 2, CNN, MSNBC. I selected the news because I am going to be honest, I probably had not watched the news prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say it before the pandemic had hit, it had been roughly about 2 or 3 years since I actually watched the news. When the news um when the pandemic did happen, I found myself subscribing to like Google alerts, things like that. And then when I finally did decide to click on the news on my television, and this was roughly about, I want to say this was the summer of 2020. Every story back to back to back to back was death, 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 weather, sports, money saver, death, death, death. Now the 9 o'clock news, repeat. And now the 10 o'clock news, repeat. Now we have Bob Barker, The Price is Right, or what have you, and then the same news again. And this project really got me to thinking that a form of media that everyone relies on so importantly actually is one of the most I guess source that actually does manipulate and turn the media into what they to their beliefs. And this does in fact shape how we as citizens grow and thrive in our culture and in our everyday life simply by the things that they promote. You never see the news promoting all of the good things about your city or what's going on. They always promote the negative, the things that are going wrong. You know, uh the crime, the lottery numbers. They never really report anything good, and it creates in a sense a mental construct that keeps you as the consumer boxed in to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go here, okay, well, I'm not going to do this, oh, well, they're doing XYZ, in this part of town, I'm not going to go here, which actually, as a consumer, that may have been a one-off incident in that particular area, but now they have shifted the person's viewpoint or perspective of said area. Okay. Secondly, and it's not often talked about, but the news only promotes lower middle class issues and what they deem as the wayside of society in their ads. The only time you actually see anyone of influence or of substance on the news is to promote something, to try to win votes, or to try to create engagement with constituents to, in a sense, run or win votes. It's very political. And so with that, you start to break down and really see that, okay, the news is one big negative story from beginning to end, and then it throws in the weather. Messages that I believe that these news channels are conveying, it's to keep, in a sense, inequality alive. It creates, in a sense, racism. It creates cultural and social barriers because people are now afraid to actually interact based off of the things they have seen on the news. And it's almost like perception for them becomes reality, where you actually do find yourself questioning, like, why is this particular culture like this? Why are, even when they report on other ethnicities or races, it's always the less fortunate, those that don't have the most, those are who are disenfranchised, who don't have access to, health, food, and services, or, just cleanliness. They always report about pretty much the bottom of the barrel people, and that is not relatable if you're someone, of upper echelon. But then I guess you don't live in that area, so you don't care about, what message they're conveying. I do believe newscasters and the way that the news reported is intentional. I believe it is. It's been structured the way that it's been structured, simply because it creates a mass hysteria and a need to keep wanting more. Now we want to know, okay, this happened in the Central West End, but what happened on the north side of town? So it actually, in a sense, keeps people engaged because it creates like a sickness almost that I need to watch this to know what's going on. The messages that can be interpreted by a younger audience are that I remember being a younger kid and watching the news and it not having the same effect on me then that it does now, simply because watching news and hearing about the crime, I always thought, oh, that doesn't happen to me. I was very nonchalant. The news, again, is not targeted towards people at that time that were teenagers. The news is targeted towards the parents, the grandparents, the great grandparents, and so on. um and it can be misleading because not every city is just all bad. In any city that you turn on these news, CNN, Fox, whatever the case may be, you will see them reporting on crime, weather, sports, and maybe some sort of ad or political stance for, that area. But they rarely report positive things, and you have to wonder why. And it is to create a mass hysteria to keep you tuned in and engaging and wanting more. Therefore, their viewership goes up. The way that it influences knowledge structures is it keeps it almost like a barrier to where you now have misconceived notions about certain geographical locations in your hometown, in your city. Unless you're one of those people who like taking life on the wild side, walking on the edge, or whatever the case may be. You will not visit those places. Usually those places are, and again, lower middle class, disenfranchised neighborhoods, and we know who live in those neighborhoods, right? And so it creates pretty much classism. It creates a separation. It creates an elitism almost. And it is all because they choose to report what they report in the way that they report, which in a sense can actually be a good thing and a bad thing. News media is very biased in almost everything that they do, from political ads to the ads that they run. Even in your zip code, everything is structured to fit your narrative and to make you, the consumer, keep engaging, wanting more. Is what is the historical slash cultural context in which the media presentation was made, and does it influence its ideology? And then it kind of gives an example of a movie that was selected, and I would say the news is able to misrepresent. I want to say, because I can speak from my existence, African American people as a whole. Not every African American person is out here committing crime. Not every African American person is out here robbing, stealing, killing. But when you turn on the news, literally, you'll see maybe one or two other ethnicities, but everyone else is African American. And to me, just especially coming off of 100 years of slavery, it still shows that there's a disconnect between cultures, because again, we're not the only ones that commit crime. You have white collar crime, blue collar crime, but the crimes that are committed in other jurisdictions and cities, even like Chesterfield, St. Peter's, you rarely hear about it. And I honestly believe, in a sense, it is set up to make the masses fear, which creates a mass hysteria to fit a narrative that separation and segregation, classism, things like that are still okay to this day, and they're not. And I know it's probably harder for people to make that connection, but when you are black and you live everyday black and you watch the news and everything that you see on the news about your people is negative, and then when you are celebrated, it's only for 1 month and for 28 days, it becomes alarming, and it mentally puts you in a place of, I do not want to see this because I know people are better than this. The news creates almost like a fear bubble for individuals, and it's actually interesting because there are so many good and positive things that occur throughout St. Louis, Missouri. There are so many positive things, from community service to buildings being open to, children getting scholarships, things like that. But if you watch, just you can literally Google search any day Fox 2 News, and I promise you it will show at least three or four crimes happening in low impoverished, disenfranchised areas in the city. And that is alarming. That is also biased, which it's hard for me to connect with the news because of that very reason. So there's that.